So today we have here the evolutionary psychologist, Dr. Douglas Lisle, the author of The Pleasure Trap. Thank you so much for being with us today.
My pleasure.
So I was wondering if you can give us a bit of a background of how you got into psychology and what it is that you do.
Well, I got into psychology because I was in my early 20s, and a book fell into my hands by the title of The Psychology of Self-Esteem. And, I'd read it. I wasn't a big reader, but I'd read a little of this and a little of that. And that book, when I read it, it was very intriguing. It was talking about things that were very interesting to me. And so it was essentially from that ignited my interest, and from there, then I became a psychology major in school, and never got out of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, my first question to you is, as a psychologist, what would you say the best way to deal with social disapproval? Once a person goes, let's say, plant-based and makes
Yes.
a great decision for themselves, they're going to get a lot of pressure from their family and peers. What is the best way to deal with that?
Best way to deal with it is to actually not try to make a big deal out of this. And what the problem is the following. Let me give you a backdrop of why it's such a mess, and the mistakes that you're being goaded into by your nature. Your nature is the following: that we lived in smaller group hunter-gatherers, and it was basically the same 30 people that you lived with your whole life. And those people, it was essentially your collective brains and abilities against all the hostile forces of nature. And so as a result, we shared information, and we were very vocal about it. So if you found where there was a crocodile at the certain bend of the river, you made sure you told everybody. And so in doing so, you every little insight, every little thing that you figured out how to use flint to make a fire, whatever it was, it was important to share. And within the process of that, you established and continue to establish your value in the village. So your own status was somewhat dependent upon you being a conduit of getting and sharing information. And so when people get this information about how useful it is to be a plant-dominated or plant-based diet, they want to share it. It's completely natural for them to do so. And if you figured out how to use flint to make a fire, when you showed people, 9 people out of the village out of 10 would be very excited. One person would be annoyed that you got there first and got the credit. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
The natural annoyance about elevated status cost them some status is a problem. But in general, the village would have been excited. This is different because we are saying, here's a new thing that's really useful, and you're doing it wrong. Okay, so it's very much we're elevating our status and lowering their status. And so as a result, it's a very tough message for people. They don't think that they're going to do it anyway because they can sniff the self-discipline that's involved, and they're not really interested in that. So there's a fight from the get-go that was never there when you showed people how to make fire. And so what happens is that when people argue back with us, we tend to get more vehement. Instead of sharing information, we got to defend it because they're attacking. So now it winds up in an acrimonious situation. So what I tell people to do really is to not act like we've discovered anything big. My attitude is that if people notice what you're doing, we just simply say we're trying this thing out, we're running an experiment, we're seeing how something goes. And when they inevitably say, yeah, well, where do you get your protein from? We say, I don't know. I'm not really sure. And that sends a signal that we're not trying to be, that we're the sage and they're the idiot. It sends a signal that we're a bumbling Mr. Magoo that is truly just experimenting with something that looks like a fad and will probably burn out on it in 90 days so that they don't have to worry about their status. Okay? And this is how we finesse that problem. And if they push us in their in their holier than thou attitude about, well, that's gonna be bad. You can't do that. You say, well, I checked with my doctor, and my doctor says it seems to make some sense and it looks like it's going to be okay. And he says that they're going to just check my protein like once a year. Okay, and that's so we like kick the can down the road so that people really have no argument against that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Take it real smooth.
Yeah, it almost feels like they're being threatened, and the best way to go about this is just to lead by example.
Yes. Just lead by example. Don't threaten. They cross-examine us. We just say, hey, we're just trying it out. Who knows? Seems like it's working for me. And, I feel better. Who knows? That's how we do it. We don't start claiming greater knowledge. If they are actually, so most of the pushback we get from people is their anxiety that we are raising our status in the village above them. And so if we take care of that, that ends their interest. Now, there are going to be some people that are actually legitimately curious, okay? The legitimately curious people that continue to ask, we send them to a book. So, pick your favorite book. If they're really smart, send them to the China Study. If they have a real high IQ, let them go chew on Colin Campbell. If they're more middle of the road, we send them to, if they're not quite as smart, you send them to the John McDougall book. If they're not quite as smart as that, you send them to Rip Esselstyn. You send them to Engine 2. It's more user friendly still. If they're very esoteric, you send them to the Pleasure Trap.
That's good.
But that's kind of what I would do. So, let the books do your talking, and actually, I suggest to people that when they do the books do the talking, tell people, well, if they say, well, I read this book, then just say, well, I didn't really read the whole thing. And the reason why I say that is that now you signal to them that they can catch you and pass you.
Ah, gotcha.
And that is now that's more enticing to them than the idea that they're always going to be trailing along behind you, that you got there first. So you say, yeah, I'm just reading this book, and actually I put the thing down halfway through, it just seemed like a good idea. I haven't read the whole thing. And I just started trying it, and it seems to be working for me. If we use that tactic, then we really dial down the cost for them of looking into it.
Oh, wow. That's really interesting.
Yes.
Okay. Dr. Lisle, you have a great lecture up on YouTube called Losing Weight Without Losing Your Mind. Can you tell us a bit more about that? Because so many people think that they're going to go crazy, ditching the meat and dairy and eating whole plant foods. Can you talk about that for a little bit?
Sure. The reason I have that lecture is because what people actually believe the key to weight loss is, they believe several things, but the most fundamental thing they believe in is that they need to eat less calorie or eat less food and exercise more. And this is it, and it's in fact true that if they eat less of the food they're eating now and they exercise more, they will in fact lose weight. It's a mathematical reality. However, I call that losing your mind. And the reason why that's true is there's a reason you eat. Let's suppose you're a person that's 30 pounds overweight right now. There's a reason why you are eating as much food as you're eating. And the reason you're eating as much food as you're eating is because you've got very sophisticated homeostatic drive mechanisms inside your brain that are causing you to eat X amount of bites of food. Okay? They just do. So I don't know how many bites that is, but the point is that let's suppose it's 1,005 bites a week. That's what you're going to do. And so if to lose weight, you start to eat 800 bites a week, you are going to be hungry, okay? And you won't be hungry right after you've eaten 2/3 of what you wanted to eat. You'll actually have some satiation. But within a few hours, you're going to be hungry, and if you continue on this path, all you're doing is you're doing what I call eating underneath the hunger drive. It's like sitting in a cold room and you've got a sweater, and you don't want to, you're not supposed to put it on. So you're just supposed to sit in there and freeze. And your brain will continue to cycle around over and over again saying, I should put the sweater on, I should put the sweater on, I should put the sweater on. It's going to be what it's going to be. Even if once in a while they turn the heat on for a couple minutes and you feel okay for a while and then they shut the heat off, pretty soon you're going to be cold. That's exactly what happens when people eat less and exercise more to lose weight. Their brain is constantly being teased into saying eat, 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 and it takes tremendous self-discipline to lose weight that way. So anybody that's ever lost weight that way, I pat you on the back. I congratulate you for truly human self-discipline that no animal would ever impose on themselves. And it's an utterly unnatural way to go about changing your body situation. So what is the solution? The solution is to back the camera up. There's so many different theories about why people are overweight. For example, you've learned to clean your plate as a kid, and therefore you ate a little bit too much because your mother told you not to waste food, or you eat too many carbohydrates because those are comfort foods and those cause people to be fat. You've got some issues in the oral stage of your development from your Freudian upbringing, and therefore you're fixated on the oral stage, and so you like to have things in your mouth, whether it be cigarettes or candy or food. Or the list goes on. You were abused as a child, and therefore your soul is slightly dinged to the left or dinged to the right, and somehow you seek food as comfort. Like, there's no end to it, okay? There's no end to the psychologizing on why it is that people have weight problems, and yet I'm going to solve this in the next 30 seconds. All you have to do is realize there's no other species on Earth that's having this problem except two. Humans, dogs, and cats are the only species that are having weight problems, and only in certain areas of the world. Okay? So if humans, dogs, and cats are the three species out of 20 million that are having a weight problem, we should be immediately suspicious that this is some deep psychological disturbance. If you stress rats in a cage, they don't get fat. Okay? If you abuse llamas, they don't get fat. Nothing responds by getting fat to any psychological stressor. Okay? So this is not a psychological problem. This is simply a problem of what you're eating. And so if you feed cats scraps from your table, or your dog scraps from your table, then they're going to start to get fat. Okay? The reason is the food is too concentrated. In that 1,005 bites that you're going to eat this week, if that food has too many calories in it that are compacted in the food, then you will have eaten in your 1,005 bites more food. It's as if you got paid at the end of the week and they gave you 12 bills, whatever it was, would it matter which 12 bills they gave you, whether it was 12 ones or $12,000 bills? Of course it would, okay? If they gave you just one $1,000 bill of the 12, they probably overpaid you. Well, if you eat food that is very concentrated in calories, then you're going to overeat when you eat your 105 bites. Now, you could lose weight by eating 800 bites, but then you're sitting in the cold room trying to not put your sweater on. You're going to lose your mind, okay? It will fall apart and it will not work, ultimately. That's why everybody gains their weight back. Everybody believes that they've got some set point, okay? So this is, Dr. Phil's thing. Like, get real. You're going to have a set point that's you. You don't have a set point. Set point is a mythical concept in weight. The issue is that you have an appropriate weight for your species and for you, which is lean. And that's what you're going to see throughout the animal kingdom. Okay, you have some animals that carry more fat, but they all carry more fat. All whales carry a lot of fat because it's characteristic of the problems that they face in their environment. But the llamas aren't fat. The geese, the geese get fat because they do a big migration. Certain animals get fat. And human beings are designed to carry a very modest amount of fat on their bodies. Women carry a little bit more, men carry a little bit less. Some people carry a little bit more than other people, but the truth is nobody is designed to look like modern Americans. In the last 25 years, the average American woman has gained about 25 pounds. So the point where that now a 35-year-old woman in the United States on average is 166 pounds. That is unbelievable. That's where all the beauty went. That's where it got trouble for people to find each other, even with the extraordinary developments on the internet like Match.com and other things like that. People are still having trouble getting together and finding relationships when now it should be easy. The reason is that people are overweight and they don't look the way they should. Okay, that's like gumming up the works. If your average woman is 166 pounds at age 35, let me tell you what that means. She looks pregnant. Okay, and the response in the animal kingdom to females that are pregnant is disinterest. Okay, so this is the problem. The solution is you have to eat like the appropriate human animal. If you eat like an appropriate human animal, when you've had your 105 bites of plant-based, plant-dominant, whole natural foods, when you do that, you won't be paid too much. You won't eat too many calories. You'll eat the appropriate amount of calories for you, and your weight will start to regulate automatically. If you're a relatively young person, it'll regulate down about 2 pounds a week. So literally, in the 20 years that it takes you to gain an extra 40 pounds, you can unwind it in 20 weeks. Okay? But it takes the discipline to actually do this, and you have to go through what Dr. Goldhammer and I call the pleasure trap. You have to go through the process of reacclimating your taste buds to much, much healthier food. And when you do that, you set yourself on a pathway to success. The beauty of it is, when I talk to women about this, and women are more obsessed with their weight than men for good reasons, their waistlines are much more scrutinized than the male waistline, because men look at those waistlines to detect pregnancy. Okay, so they're under very intense scrutiny. I explain to them that if you don't want to go this path, that's fine, but you have to understand the phenomenal competitive advantage you have if you do, because other people aren't going to do it. Okay, so it's literally a gold laying in the street that needs to be picked up. And if people pick it up, if women will pick up that gold, they put themselves in a spectacularly competitive position in the romantic arena, which is a very big deal.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point, is that it's all about eating the right food, not eating less.
It's about eating the right food. It doesn't hurt. My friend Rip Esselstyn will say that, diet is the king and exercise is the queen. Doesn't hurt to exercise. It's a good thing. It's a useful adjunct. But it's not the key. The central key is we've got to get the very rich food out of the diet and move towards a diet that is consistent with the teachers that we have today. McDougall, Esselstyn, Campbell, etc., Dr. Goldhammer, Joel Fuhrman. This is the direction people need to go. And if they go that direction, they don't have to be perfect, but if they go that direction, they're going to find a very good response. They will not have to eat under the hunger drive. Eat comfortably, eat as much as you want, don't try to eat less, and you will be on the right track.
Absolutely. So, Dr. Lisle, what is your take on salt? Do you agree that one should have it in the diet, or should aim for a low salt or even a salt-free diet? Because salt is very pleasurable, and that's one of the things you talk about. So,
yeah, salt's an interesting problem, and I think that I call our arena the hyper health arena. In other words, it's not just interested in health; it's people that are really interested in health and are very, very knowledgeable. So this is a little bit controversial in the hyper health arena, and so I can run the gamut. So Dr. McDougall is not that concerned about salt, and the reason he's not that concerned about salt is that he's so much more concerned about getting the general direction correct. So he's interested in getting all the oil out of the diet. He's interested in getting the animal food out of the diet. And so that's what he's interested in. And so if people need to sprinkle some sugar and some salt on their food in order to make that happen, he figures like he's winning 95% of the battle and he's not worried about the last 5%. So that's McDougall's position, and it's very reasonable. Okay, there are people that for example, that may have hypertension, and they may not do as well on that kind of a diet as if you go all the way to the floor. So Dr. Goldhammer will not use any salt in his diet at all, other than the natural sodium that's in there. And you will see the most dramatic effects in hypertension with the Goldhammer diet. So it will be one notch superior in outcome to the McDougall diet. However, that's a short-term effect, because we should check them a year later to see who's still doing it. Okay, because Alan Goldhammer's recommendations are going to be more difficult to follow, and therefore it's going to be probably more likely that people will toss their hands up and forget it. Okay, now interestingly enough, there are many people that I have met that when they have gone all the way to a completely whole natural foods diet with no added salt at all, after a period of a few months, they can acclimate to that, and then they don't want it any different. Okay, which is interesting. Also, an interesting sidelight is that it appears that the inclusion of sodium in the diet is a reason for for I think unknown reasons at this point, but it appears to disrupt sleep, and it probably does so because you probably become thirsty. Okay. In a way that you wouldn't if you were not eating sodium. So the little alarm bell goes off inside the head at 3 in the morning, and it will actually wake you up. So when Alan found that out, he was very happy about this, because that gave him an argument for his position. I think these are relatively minor issues. Unless you happen to be someone with very high blood pressure. If you're with very high blood pressure, sodium causes you to retain water and therefore contributes and exacerbates high blood pressure. But if you are not somebody that's specifically dealing with high blood pressure, also, even if you don't have high blood pressure, but you have a severe cardiovascular condition, you've had a couple heart attacks, you've had 2-3 stents put in, and you're short of breath and you're in congestive heart failure, you may not have high blood pressure, but you are taxing the system by having extra sodium in the diet and therefore extra fluid in the cardiovascular system. So for severe cardiovascular cases, which include high blood pressure, I would say the less sodium added, the better. Anybody else, I would say minor issue. It's not something that I worry about, at all personally. I have my food is salted to the level that I like it, which tends to be a fairly low sodium diet. But I'm not fastidious about it.
Yeah, I think salt's an interesting one, and it's one that I've been very interested in myself. Yeah, I think as long as folks can go towards the lower end, I think most people are going to be safe. So.
Yeah, the big problem is that when people are into very salty diets, those are salty and greasy.
That's right, yeah.
And so they're just by the very nature of headed towards a healthier food, you will, as you get used to diets without all the grease in them, you'll be moving towards a lower sodium fare, and then I think it kind of takes care of itself.
Right, great, thank you for that.
You bet.
So the next question, it's going to be a little bit long just to kind of explain it, but
sure.
I have a lot of viewers that are interested in raw food diets with just raw, fresh fruits and vegetables. And
yes.
As I was reading The Pleasure Trap, I noticed you have 3 factors of why people do things the way they do them. And so one is seek pleasure, avoid pain, and energy conservation. And I was just thinking, having a raw fruitarian diet, would that cover all of those factors? Would you say humans are designed for that type of diet, or what is your take on that?
Yeah, they're not designed for that diet. It's going to turn out that we're designed for a diet with cooked food in it. And so this started about 2 million years ago, and you can actually see the morphological changes in the human chest cavity and an extraordinary reduction in the size of the stomach. So, and the reason why the stomach shrank in our species over the last 2 million years is because of the use of cooked food. If you look at our stomach has about 1/3 the surface area of a chimpanzee, which is an equivalent sized primate. And the reason why that's true is that the chimpanzee doesn't have a large stomach; they have a typical stomach for primates. And the reason is that they need a normal sized stomach in order to process the amount of vegetation that is necessary for them to survive on a raw food diet. And so the average chimpanzee is actually chewing about 6 hours a day. That's what they do. The average human being chews for about 1 hour a day. Okay, so there's a big difference in literally the time that's involved in eating. And that time reduction is the processing of the food that is done through cooking. That's actually what caused that difference. And so as with our jaw is actually quite a bit different. It's not nearly as strong as a chimp. I have it on good authority from primatologists that I know that they say if you've ever been kissed by a chimp, you'll never forget it. They're so much stronger. Their lips are so much stronger than humans. It's freaky. And this is the equivalent sized animal to us. Yeah, so it's going to turn out that our diets have actually gotten so soft. But well, let me follow this argument a little further, and then we're going to go back and we're going to talk about the over softness of the human diet. So the human diet was designed by nature to have large amounts of raw food in it, because it would, and then a substantial amount of cooked food. And the cooked food would have probably, well, we actually know it would have primarily been root vegetables, is what it was. It was primarily, potato-like things in the ground in Africa. And so what happened is this actually is how, in fact, human nature was born behind the advent of fire. Fire is the singular tool that actually changes the course of human evolution and causes us to be human. This is what happened. That starting about 2 million years ago, at that time, proto-humans, Australopithecus, was not a pair bond species. In other words, there was no long-term relationships in the mating between male and female. There were no families. What there was a standard operating procedure, which is true for 97% of mammals, which is that the males did no paternal investment in the offspring whatsoever. So the females would be in charge of their children, and they would feed them and raise those children, and it would take them many years to do so. Now, when you have children, you can imagine that you cannot possibly hunt. There's just no way that organism can hunt. And so that species was designed as a raw food vegan species, is what it was. The males were also a raw food vegan species. In other words, they didn't have specialization that the males could go off and hunt while the females were gathering berries and eating roots. All of the species, the entire species, simply ate the same food. The males were, and they were eating probably for 6 hours a day. They were like foraging all the way, they were literally eating 6 hours a day, and then the other half of the time they're moving from one spot to the other to get the food. So in other words, they're basically eating all day long, is what's happening. Now, starting about 2 million years ago, they started to use fire. And this is extraordinary. So what would have happened is that the females would have been, for the first time, able to start to use root vegetables. Now, root vegetables are much higher in calories than eating fruit off the vine. Fruit off the vine might be 200 or 300 calories. The root vegetables are 500 calories. So it's doubling the calorie density. Now, the problem is that you can't eat it raw. It's too tough to eat raw. It's not worth the trouble. So you could eat it. You can eat a raw potato, but the amount of energy that it takes to digest it and the amount of calories that you get out of it isn't worth doing. And your intuition tells you that, which is why you don't like it. Okay? In other words, it's too hard. It doesn't taste. It's not sugary enough. Forget it. You'd much rather eat grapes. Okay? So, however, if we cook that potato, suddenly it's a whole different story. Now it's a lot softer. Okay? And that softness means there's a lot less muscular action that's involved in its digestion. So there's much less energy required to digest that food. Okay? Not only that, it's going to turn out that by cooking that carbohydrate, you actually gelatinize the starch. and you make the starch you make the calories more available and much easier to get to. So you've effectively increased the calorie density of that food considerably. Okay, not only that, you've actually lowered the amount of digestion time. So the food doesn't have to remain in the stomach as long. It's passing into the small intestine much, much faster, which means you don't have to have as large a stomach. Okay, so now what you're going to see is you're going to see that the jaws should get less tough. Okay, and you should also get a smaller stomach, and you should get teeth that are not as strong. All three of those things have happened in our species. Okay, we don't see it this way, but our mouths are extraordinarily small for primates. They're not even remotely close to any other primate. So we clearly are an odd man out, not even close. And it's clearly behind the fact that we take small bites and we get a lot of calories out of them. Okay, and we don't have to chew them very hard. It's actually going to turn out that when you look at skulls in Africa, the teeth are great. Okay, from all through the last several thousand years, and excuse me. And so what's going to happen is that that's not true starting 1,000 years ago, particularly in Europe. And the reason is that it actually requires some stress in order to grow the jaw, and you need the toughness of the raw food, of actually crunching down on it in development, in order to make the jaw big enough to support all the teeth that come in. Started using too much processed food in the last 1,000 years. They started to not stress the jaws of their children, and as a result, their teeth get crowded, and then they need braces. Okay, so orthodontia is completely secondary to the fact that human beings have drifted away from their raw food ancestry. You know what I mean? Towards overly processing the food, which is exactly what you see today. Okay, and all the problems that you see today. However, back to the action on all your people that are very interested in raw food. So I like to balance this out, because as I'm criticizing ultimately the raw food thinking, the truth is that there's great merit in it. So in other words, the truth winds up being somewhere in the middle. Okay, now, so our species began an extraordinary odyssey, and that odyssey would be that the women would start to dig root vegetables and collect them in a pile at the end of the day, and then go to the trouble of lighting a fire. And they learned how to light a fire, probably either protecting fires from lightning strikes, or more likely they started to use flint. Okay, so as a result of that, they could cook their food at the end of the day and feed their children. Now, they were eating raw food all day long while they're doing this, but they're also headed towards a large amount of calories at the end of the day in the form of cooked carbohydrate. Now, it's important to remember that, because the eating of large amounts of cooked carbohydrate at the end of the day has been found characteristic of every single hunter-gatherer troop in the world. There's no exceptions. Okay, this is human nature. So people, think that, shouldn't we be eating, throughout the day, nibbling throughout the day like our hunter-gatherer ancestors, i.e., eating a bunch of raw food? No, that is not what human beings did. Human beings ate the bulk of their calories at the end of the day behind cooked carbohydrate. They've been doing that for 2 million years before they could talk. Okay, now, and we can tell this why? Because of the smallness of the stomach, the weakness of the jaw, the weakness of the teeth, etc. Okay, all of this fits together. Now, I want you to picture what must have happened in sub-Saharan Africa when this was happening. What happens is that the females are cooking this fire at the end of the day and cooking that food. The problem is that when you do that, other male humans are going to wait around and come and steal the food. There would be nothing to stop them from doing this. Okay, other animals will stay away because they're afraid of the fire. They actually have instinctual fear, because the smell of fire means a forest fire, and a forest fire means you're dead. So human beings were able to use fire to intimidate other animals away from them, but not other humans. Okay, other humans were not afraid of the fire because they could use fire as well. So the males would simply sit around and wait for some poor female and then go steal her food. There's nothing that she's going to be able to do about this. So as some male goes up to some bush and sees, a fire and then goes through the bush, what's he going to find? He's going to find a female and her 3 children and a male. He's going to see a male there standing guard, there with his spear, like, don't come in here, buddy. I'm going to protect this food. That's the dawn of human pair bonding, okay? The dawn of human pair bonding is males, bigger, stronger males, protecting the food supply of females. They make a deal, okay? Now what's going to happen, and that deal is going to be, it's going to enable something that the vegetarian community is not comfortable with, which is that you wind up with a specialization of labor, which is the only time we've ever seen this in any species on Earth. The male becomes specialized at hunting, and the female gathering of the vegetable material. And at the end of the day, she comes and cooks the vegetable material. The male gets a piece of it. She's in fact a venture capitalist, that she supports him, that he can take the risk to go out there and hunt. Hunting is very, very risky behavior. You may not be successful for 3 weeks. Our species could not afford that until you had fire making more of these root vegetables available. So the female would consistently do this. She cannot hunt because she's got children. She is strictly going to be a gatherer of vegetable material. Human males developed the coordination and ability in the upper body musculature to throw projectiles in order to kill. And so our species then became a species for the first time ever where the 2 adults literally trust each other, okay? That they are bonded, and the male can know that he's got something to eat at the end of the day, that he was going to be able to survive while he goes out there and tries to make a killing, okay? This is actually still the underlying economic behavior that takes place in males and females in pair bonding today, where the female's job is to get the secure job, okay? Mid-level job, not anything fancy, make sure that we get the first decent salary, okay? And the male's job is to make a killing in business, okay? It's literally the same psychology. Now, so what's going to happen, though, is that as that male that's sitting waiting for a fire knows that it's not profitable to go chase that fire, it's profitable if he takes 3 of his buddies with him. Because if they all go and see that fire, there's only going to be one guy there with a spear, and they'll just overpower or intimidate him, and then they'll take the food anyway, okay? Except that when they push the grass back, they don't see 1 male with 1 woman. They see 10 men, a village, okay? So very, very quickly, human beings gathered together in village groups where there would be 20 men or 10 men or 30 men and a whole bunch of females and a whole bunch of children and a whole bunch of fires. And now you get exactly the social organization that we still see today, 2 million years later, okay? And we get the very same process where the male's job in the village is to actually go out into the woods and try to get these extraordinary killings where they get thousands of calories with 1 lucky strike, where the female's job is to make sure they get the steady plant food, okay? Now, this species doesn't need meat. It's a Johnny-come-lately addition to the diet. We haven't adapted to needing this at all. What we've adapted to, we can use it, but we've adapted, though, to the cooking of it, whether it's cooked meat or cooked carbohydrate. The cooked food is the big concentrated calories that comes at the end of the day that human beings look forward to, and that this is where the whole village atmosphere congregates. We still see that this is true. In other words, people still want to, particularly at dinner time, get together with a group of people and eat. And what they want to eat is cooked food, okay? Now, so what do? Now what they've gone is gone overboard. They eat everything cooked, okay? They don't even want to eat an apple anymore because of the effort that it takes to crunch it off of the apple. They don't want to eat any carrots. They don't want to do anything that might stress their precious little energy in their mouth. They drink Coca-Cola. In other words, you're seeing what's happening to the species. Raw food diets are difficult to do, and it's going to turn out that what people do in raw food diets, in order to mimic the calorie density of, in fact, cooked food, they do a bunch of drying and dehydrating, They process the daylights out of their food with a blender. They use oils. They do all kinds of things. Okay, and that's because in their heart and in their gut, they crave 500 calorie a pound semi-processed food, which is what a cooked potato is. Okay, so what we really want to do is we want to head towards a more McDougall style process. That's really where we're going, and that is in fact very consistent with the natural history of the organism. And if we do that, we wind up with a balance of a lot of raw food in the diet plus the cooked carbohydrate. When we do that, we get the appropriate amount of bites for the amount of calories that you need. Everything works beautifully, and that's how we're designed.
Wow, that's so fascinating listening to all that evolutionary science. I mean, I really do wonder, where does this paleo movement get their argument at that humans evolved with eating meat? Have you?
Well,
Yeah.
they did evolve with eating meat. They evolved to include meat in the diet, but it's not necessary. Okay, so the big mistake that the paleo folks are making is as follows. They make several, but I'm gonna triangulate on one really very important logical error, and that is that I want you to think about a car that begins its life as a diesel, and that it uses diesel fuel, and that if you just put diesel fuel in it, it will go 100,000 miles without any problems. And then it's going to have problems and it's going to die on you, okay? So that's how that car works. And we're going to live in a land where you can only go one way on the street. So as you wander through this land on these windy roads, there aren't very many filling stations, but every time there's a filling station, you fill up the car. Okay? Because you never know, you might get caught short and have to push that car, and it's your primary vehicle of locomotion. Now, I want you to imagine that somewhere along this process, it turns out that you can have a choice where you can put gasoline in the car as well. Now, it's not as good a fuel. It gums up the fuel injectors. There's problems with it. But if you put gasoline in the fuel, if you put nothing but gasoline in there, the thing would go 70,000 miles, not 100. Okay? If you put half gas and half diesel in, it's going to go 85,000 miles. Okay? So the more diesel you can put in, the healthier the car is, but you can use gasoline. Now I want you to picture this and realize that if you lived in that land, then whenever you came across a station, whether it was a gas station or a diesel station, the right thing to do is to always fill it up. Even if you just filled up with diesel 10 miles ago and you came across a station and the next station you came on was gas, you'd fill it up with gas. Okay? The reason is you never know. That might be the difference between you not making it to the next station or not. That is precisely the situation that our ancestors faced. It was eat whatever was available, because that might be the difference between you starving and not starving. Okay? They never knew where their next meal was coming from, and they needed the widest possible palate that they could get in order to increase their likelihood of survival. One of the things that you will see in humans that is so different from other primates is that other primates simply live in the same habitat and they don't wander. They have very, very small roaming ranges. They essentially stake out a territory and they live in it. Human beings are the wanderer. And you see this today, that human beings have an extraordinary wanderlust, okay? That one of the biggest industries in the world is travel, and travel is the dream of human beings. When I retire, when I get enough money, that is not classic of animals. That is a bizarre characteristic of our species. And so if you look at our species, you see that we are in fact the widest ranging large land animal on Earth, okay? We have gone everywhere. We've crossed oceans. We've crossed rivers. We've gone into very difficult territories. We love the adventure of seeing what's over the next mountain, and that it turns out you could only do that if you widen the palate to include everything that you could possibly put in there. Human beings have the widest palate of all primates, And so we needed it, so we included meat. We did not eat raw meat for very long. It turns out raw meat is very, very difficult and problematic and is hard on people and will make them sick. So it turns out that we cooked it. Okay? So at the end of the day, human beings were eating mostly cooked carbohydrate. They were eating cooked meat if they could get it. The cooked meat was not an ideal food for the optimal health of the species. It was dirty fuel that you would add to it because your biggest threat to survival was starvation. Okay? Much better to die of a degenerative disease at 84 in the wild as a result of including animal food in your diet than to die at 22 of starvation because you weren't willing to eat the meat. Okay? The paleo people do not grasp and understand this argument. I do not see it in their writings. They simply are using a very simplistic, superficial pattern match, which says clearly our animal ancestors eat meat, therefore we should be eating meat today, which is just utterly ludicrous. Okay, it's a horribly illogical argument. Whereas the vegan folks are saying, look, the vegan folks can get into trouble by saying that that isn't true. You know, you don't want to do that. You want to say you are correct that our ancestors ate meat, but the thing is that they were including it as a dirty fuel in order to reduce their likelihood of starvation. Okay, but it is not in fact an optimal fuel. And we can demonstrate that empirically by putting people on whole natural foods vegan diets, and they become healthier than under any other dietary circumstances. So that, you know, the problem has to be solved in the modern environment by scientific investigation. It cannot be solved by speculation into our natural history.
Right.
Okay? So hopefully that clarifies that.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was a great way you put it there.
Good.
Well, I want to thank you, Dr. Lisle. That's all the questions I have. But real quick, I do want to get folks to get to know you a bit more. So can you give us a bit of your website and where people can connect with you?
Yes. Eventually, I'll have a website that's decent on drlisle.com. But you can connect with me and see where I'm at and some things that I'm doing on the True North Health website, which is truenorthhealth.com. And my materials, like my videos and stuff, are on John McDougall's website at drmcdougall.com.
Great.
Okay.
Yep. Well, thank you so much for this interview.
Very good.
Yeah, I'd love to have you on again.
Pleasure. I enjoyed it very much. Thank you for having me.